Okay, so now we have beautiful questions on the table. And speaking about the table, let's go straight to the Seder table. Why is the matzah called halachma anya? So why is matzah called lachma anya? So that's the question. It goes a little bit to what Jerry was saying, because we have to get to the root of why we say this is the matzah they ate. And so I have here in the Mesivta Haggadah, to answer this question, we have, guess how many answers? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 answers. And then we want to know what Jerry asked also the question, did they eat matzah in Egypt? That was exactly Jerry's question. So then we have 5 more questions about that. And then we have also the question, why do we always say kol dichvin? Hey, Moshe. Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I forgot your brother's name. Ezra. And so then we have the question, why do we always say kol dichvin on Pesach and not on other holidays? And we have a lot. So let's just get started here. So why is the matzah called lachma anya? So we find some say that hello Shepso and Tira. So some say lachma anya comes from the words. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Okay, so some say it comes from the words that anya comes from the word to answer. Milashon aniyat divarim, from the expression of to answer. So the Gemara explains, lechem ani, lechem sha'onin alav dvarim harbe. Thira, we're discussing the phrase right at the beginning of the Haggadah. Why is matzah called lechem oni? So the first answer is the Gemara says it's the bread that oneh, that you answer a lot of things about. Meaning to say, la'anot. Ezra came back from Israel, the word la'anot means to answer. And Rashi explains that it means, why does it mean dvarim harbe, many things? That we say the Hallel about it, the Haggadah about it. You have a lot of beautiful things. This is the puzzle that they gave me from Rebelli Mel's Tever. He gave us as a little present for the kids, a pekvas. Okay, the Barbanel says, but he questions this answer. Already in the verse, matzah is called lechem oni. And so therefore, it can't be that it's because that we answer a lot of things about the Haggadah. Because in the time of the Torah, there was obviously no Haggadah. So he challenges that answer. And so therefore, another answer is lechem oni, because it says, v'higada tova bincha. There's a mitzvah to tell the next generation. And there's no aniyat dvarim, there's no conversation. It's more important than to answer the questions of the next generation. And so therefore, so that's the first answer. That what is lechem oni? Why is matzah called lechem oni? Answer number one, the bread that you answer a lot of things about, that you discuss a lot of things, either the Haggadah or v'higada tova bincha. That's answer number one. Number two, Ezra, that it comes not from answering, but from an expression of poverty. Second reason why matzah is called the lechem oni is because since we break the bread in half to make a blessing on a broken piece of bread, and that's like a poor man who eats only a broken piece of bread. Because the poor person knocks on the doors, they don't give him a full loaf. They said, here, let me break my bread in half. And by the way, that's what it's called lechem oni. One of the nicest things about this flight, we're on the flight, they gave us so much food, but you're on the flight, you know, like when you're in grade school, you see a friend, he brings a snack, you say, can I have some of that? They break it in half. The whole plane was like that. Anybody have food, they're breaking it, sharing it with everybody, walking around, everybody was going to Poland, to Lezhensk. Okay, a third reason, Ezra, why it's called the Braita gives another answer, because it says the Gemara, when you bake it very quickly. A poor man needs to save fuel, so you don't like leave the heat on all day. You quickly pour it in the oven very fast. So that's what it's called. Just like a woman, she bakes it. That's meaning to say that the man is stoking the oven and the woman is baking it, meaning to say that they have to work very quickly, the poor people. Rashi and the Sefer HaManhig explain that it's called lechem oni because that this is a complicated answer, but there is a sacrifice, a sacrificial offering, which is the offering of a poor man, which is a grain offering. And so therefore, it's the minimum amount that he needs to bring. And so the matzah is that same amount. The matzah is that same amount because a matzah is made from the dough, which is called asirita ephah, 1/10 of an ephah. And that's the same as the poor man's offering. And that's a technical answer. The Ritva gives another answer because the matzah is always flat. That's like a poor person. He's low down. He feels humbled. And so the dough of the matzah is always flattened out. It never rises and full of hot air like the regular dough of the rich man. Okay. Another answer. This is from the Or Zarua. Or Zarua is from Vienna in the 13th century. He writes, since the matzah has nothing added to it, anybody ever have salt in their matzah? No. Right? You can't have salt in your matzah. You have no flavor in your matzah. It's just flour and water. It's the bare minimum. So that's the sign. The Barbanel, the Chukas Pesach, writes that the matzah is called lechem oni because that's what poor people eat. Because why do poor people eat it? Because you eat a little bit of it fills you up. You don't go to the bathroom after you eat it. It dries you out. So that poor person eats a little bit of matzah in the morning, they're good the whole day. Okay. So those are all the answers. So now we see a lot of answers why it's called lechem oni. One is because you speak a lot about, you say a lot of things. Number two, it's the bread of poor people. And there's a third approach, and we have four answers following this approach. That it's called it's from an expression of oni is an expression of affliction. Affliction. Rabbi Shimon says it's called lechem oni because we were afflicted. Enoi means we were afflicted in Egypt. We were enslaved. Here's a sefer I never heard of. Shnayim miyodea. Who knows two? I never heard of that sefer. Writes that it's an expression of affliction because the matzah afflicts the body. I guess he had a stomach ache. A lot of people do matzah doesn't agree with. So whereas chametz, challah is easier to digest unless you're celiac. But matzah, generally speaking, is much harder to digest, so it's called the bread of affliction. I've always heard that answer as a joke. I never heard anybody really say it seriously, but now we see it serious. The Barbanel brings that there are some who explain that it's called this because Barbanel brings that there are some who explain that it's called matzah, a bread of affliction, because together with the commandment about the matzah came a lot of afflictions in Egypt. There were a lot of afflictions that were brought upon the Egyptians. Well, if that's the case, okay, fine. The last answer about here is that since the prohibition of chametz on Pesach is even with just one small drop, therefore, it's very hard to prepare the house for Pesach. And people who prepare the house for Pesach might feel afflicted. Anybody ever feel that way? So therefore, it's called the bread of affliction. Okay. Now we go to the next question, which Jerry asked. We want to know, did they eat matzah in Egypt? Because the pasuk says you have to eat the matzah. Because this is what we ate. They didn't have time for the dough to rise. But did they eat the matzah in Egypt? So how do we say, this is the bread that our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt? Did they eat bread? Did they eat matzah in Egypt? Because didn't it say in the verse that the dough didn't have time to rise, and they put it in their shoulders and they baked it, which they goat matzot. They baked matzah because it was not chametz. So that was Jerry's question just before we started. Yasha koch, Jerry. So the Ramban explains in his commentary to the Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 16 that the Torah requires that the matzah be lechem oni aside from the fact that they went out in haste, but it's also a reminder that in Egypt, the Jewish people gave them this bread, very little bread and very little water. And that's what it means that we had this type of bread, which was considered poor person's bread, also when we were in Egypt. That's Ramban's answer. So that's a very good question that you could start your Seder with and say, did we eat matzah in Egypt? And you say, first of all, we don't know. Say, first of all, it says it right here. The first line, this is the bread that our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. The second question, so that's the first answer. Ramban says they ate it. The Ibn Ezra's answer is, the Ibn Ezra says that when he was captured in India, they fed him matzah and they never gave him chametz. Do you know when the Ibn Ezra lived? I believe it's the 11th century. So he said he was captured in India in the 11th century.
He went to visit the Rambam in Egypt, so maybe on that journey.
Is India near Egypt? Egypt is near Rwanda. It's not near India.
No, Egypt is on the Red Sea, but it's also on the Indian Ocean, meaning that like they have the coast, the east coast of Egypt is the Indian Ocean.
Maybe once he got on the boat, he just kept going.
Yeah, so
I guess so, but I never thought India was next to Egypt. It's probably like a big boat journey.
Next to is a very relative.
All right.
It's
Anyway,
not a plane ride; it's a boat ride.
He said he was captured in India and they fed him matzah because matzah, they could give you a little bit, same idea. And also the Egyptians, they gave the Jewish people to eat matzahs. Another answer is those matzahs that they ate those matzahs in Egypt because the Jewish people were certain that one day they would leave. They were waiting for the time. They said, we have to get used to eating the matzah because one day we're going to be exiled, redeemed. The redemption will come in a moment. And since the redemption will come in a moment, then we'll be able to leave in a second. Wow. Meaning to say they were getting ready. They were preparing. Another answer that's given is that we ate this matzah together when we brought the Paschal lamb in Egypt. That's what it says. That they ate the meat that night on roasted meat and matzah. Okay. The Midrash Bechidush explains that when it says halach ma'anya here, it doesn't mean bread. Rather, it means a meal. The word lachem doesn't always mean bread. It could also sometimes mean a meal. That this is the food, meaning to say this food our fathers used to eat in Egypt, meaning to say we had very little to eat, like a little piece of vegetable and that's it. And so now we have a lot of foods to eat. So that's the answer, that we had a sparse meal or whatever the word is. And finally, that this is the other way to read it is that this is the matzah that our forefathers ate because of what happened to them in Egypt, that Egypt sent them out. So we see a lot of discussion about whether or not they ate this actual matzah in Egypt. A big discussion about it. And all righty. So now, answer your question, I hope, Jerry. I hope it sufficiently answered it. Now we're up to the next question. What? Yeah, let's hear it.
Vilna Gaon also feels that with the Abarbanel that this is what they ate in Mitzrayim.
Oh,
so there are plenty of other people that agree that
of course
they had to. It was part of the whole experience. They were fed it. They had to bake it because it didn't last. It was it's all part of it.
One time, like many years ago, I gave a Shabbos Haggadah discussion where we said that Egypt was the ones who discovered yeast bread. So it makes sense that only the Egyptians ate the yeast bread, but we Jews, we were enslaved. So we had the matzah bread to eat, the opposite of the sourdough. Okay.
Why was it sourdough?
Because they didn't have yeast in packs. So what was the sourdough? When we say yeast, When the Torah says kol seor v'kol chametz that you can't have, seor means yeast, but what does it mean by yeast? They had it like a starter dough. Anybody here ever make sourdough bread? More, you heard of it? Yeah, well, in the pandemic, that became a popular thing. People started experimenting, but sourdough is how they used to make their bread. Yeah, yes, Jerry.
I heard an interesting explanation about the 7 days boycott of Egyptian bread, the yeast bread, just as we've had Americans boycotting Coca-Cola, for example, because of some fight they had with them. They stopped buying Coca-Cola. So the story I read was the Jews were using a Coca-Cola kind of protest against the rising bread that they used to eat or was available in Egypt. And so, punkt verkehrt, adraba, they ate unleavened bread for 7 days.
Beautiful, beautiful. I like that. Very interesting. By the way, you say the word Adarabba. The Adarabba, I'm reminded over and over again on this trip, we sang the song Adarabba. Adarabba means just the opposite, because Rebbe Melech, he wrote those words, the words Adarabba, and Avram Free wrote a song about it. He says, place in our hearts just to see Adarabba, Temui Beinu, Liros Malos Chavarenu, Velo Chesronav. Now we could see the best part of our friends. This is a prayer before you pray. Rebbe Mel says, put in our hearts that we can only see the best qualities of our friends and not, God forbid, the opposite, their worst qualities. Too often, we look at somebody and we look at the part that bothers them about us. We see the worst in people. Put it in our hearts that we only see the best in people. It's always our responsibility. Hello, Mr. Dobson. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your help. Always comes whenever I call. That always our job, you were discussing, that a job of a Jew is to look into somebody else and try to find their best qualities and not their worst qualities. That's what it means to be a Jew. Yeah. Okay, so now we have the question, why on the night of Pesach, did I cut you off, Rabbi Yosef? Did you have a question?
I didn't say anything yet. I found on a website called Wisdom Lib that Rabbi Ibn Ezra travels to Hindu in order to understand their number system, and he wrote about in his Sefer HaMispar. So apparently, at some point, they, I guess, suspected, why is somebody coming from Spain? And
they threw him in prison.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so now we have the question, why do we say this phrase, let all who are hungry come and eat, only on Pesach and not on any other holiday? Okay, so why do we say kol dichven yesev yechu? Because that's the next part of the Haggadah. So we have here 13 answers to this question. Rashi says, we're not saying it, so this is a good answer. We're not saying it to the poor people, but we're saying it to the people of our own household, because we want everybody to be hungry on the night of Pesach, so you eat the matzah with a hearty appetite. So we say, whoever made yourself hungry, come and partake of this feast. So that's a very important thing. We're not saying it to the poor, we're saying it to the people of our own house. There's a special concept of being hungry for matzah. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Yakar, do you know who he was? He was actually a teacher of Rashi's. He says, he says it's not for the poor people, but rather he's saying, similar to what Rashi says, okay, I mean, it's very similar, but he's a little bit, I'll read it. So he says, this is not an announcement for the poor to come and eat, because we're not talking about poor people who are opening up their homes to people who are opening up their homes to the poor, but rather it's a teaching and a practical teaching to somebody who's hungry and he has matzah, that he should bring the matzah and eat it with a hearty appetite. However, when it says kol ditzrich, whoever is in need, yavo v'yivsach, meaning to say if somebody's poor and he has no matzah to eat with a hearty appetite, that he shouldn't take this from the charity box. But nevertheless, he should come and partake of the Pesach, meaning to say he should eat from us. If somebody can't afford to buy matzah, come and partake in our matzah, meaning to say that you should eat the matzah at the end on a full appetite. So that's what he's saying. Okay. The third approach is from the Orchos Chaim. The Orchos Chaim is from Provence. He says that this statement, let all are hungry come and eat, that's a continuation. Well, we're explaining to the children, why are we breaking the matzah in two? And we're saying we're breaking the matzah in two because our forefathers, when they left Egypt, they ate it quickly and they divided up amongst their friends. And they said to each other that anybody who didn't prepare the food should come and eat from me. And so therefore, whoever doesn't have anything for the Pesach, they should come and enjoy our Pesach. So that's basically what he's saying, is that this is what happened in Egypt. That whoever didn't have them would split up the matzah, would split up the Pesach. We're telling the story of Egypt. That's what it is. Wow, beautiful, right? Did you ever hear that, Ezra? Okay. The Shiboi Aleket, he's another one we said we've been seeing. He's 13th century Italian. He brought in the name of his brother, Rabbi Binyamin, that since it says, meaning to say, that since he gave this answer yesterday, something else. He said, since we were exiled to Babylon because we ate from the bread, we're saying, okay, whoever wants to atone from this sin of eating the chametz on Pesach, they should come, and that now we're being careful about it. Everybody should come and say we only eat matzah, and then we'll be redeemed and go to Jerusalem. The Abudram, he says, different answer. He says that since Pesach, everything is very expensive. Today it's expensive. Back then it's expensive. Although, somebody told me that if you go to the store Bingo in the Five Towns, that they're selling matzah, shur matzah, hand matzah, for $8.99 a pound, which is so cheap compared to what? Why do you say that?
Can't be that good. I mean, it's flour and water.
Yeah, but usually the matzah, that hand water matzah, goes for like $40 a pound.
Just in Muncie, there was like different types of boxes, but there was like ones that went to like $14.
Yeah, 14 I've seen at Costco, but I never saw for $8.99. Bingo. I didn't get it.
You know
But-
what else?
What else?
The big boxes of regular matzah, there's only 4 boxes in them this year, not 5.
Whoa. I don't even eat that matzah. I only eat the
Same price, but it's
they cut out a box of matzah. All right. So hello, Rabbi Eliezer. So the Abudram, right? And by the way, if I didn't give anybody matzah at the end, I'm going to give you a box today. The Abudram writes that since on the night of Pesach you can't afford it, therefore they say let everybody come on and eat. Meaning to say, if you have nothing to eat, come eat with us, because people are poor. Therefore, specifically Pesach, that was a time where people couldn't afford it. People couldn't afford it specifically on Passover. The Ritva gives another answer. He says it's an expression of freedom. Our forefathers were poor, but now we have so much food, everybody could come to our Kiddush. That's what we're saying. We have so much food now, everybody can partake. The Rokeach, who's the Rokeach? The Rokeach means a perfumer. The Rokeach writes, he died in 1217 in Germany, or maybe 1237 or something. He writes that because so he says, because everybody, all Jews are obligated on this night to eat matzah. Unlike everybody else, there's no other obligation to eat a specific food on any other holiday. It's the only food that people are obligated to eat. And so therefore, since it's the only time people are obligated to eat something, we say you have to come, we invite everybody to eat it. Another answer is that actually, this was the practice that everybody used to say at every meal that you had. in the ancient world, every festival, everybody would say, every Shabbos, he would say these words, called Dichven Yosef Yecho. Especially everybody would say it. Why did that practice stop? But it's just on night of Pesach, since we are saying, formalizing what we said, therefore it got included. But it actually used to be the practice that everybody would always say it. You're obligated to eat on Sukkot, but not a specific food. You're not obligated. There's for sure no biblical obligation to eat a specific food. You have to eat in the Sukkah, but there's no biblical obligation to eat a specific food. The apples and honey is a custom. Rabbi Moshe Pizanti, he writes that it's a reminder to us of the Paschal Lamb, where everybody would register for the Paschal Lamb. Okay. Hold on, let me see. The Maaseh Hashem writes that this is a continuation of the crying that we were making. Meaning to say we were crying that this is the bread of our affliction, that we're eating this meal because we're reminded that we used to eat it in the temple and now we don't have the temple. And so since we don't have the Korban Pesach, anybody could come. It used to be when we had the Paschal Lamb, you had to register, but now anybody could come. And so it's a reminder of what we don't have, meaning to say that it's Hefkervelt, everybody could come. Hey, Mayor, come on in. We're just finishing.
Hefkervelt.
Yeah,
Like
Hefker.
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 Like just the concept of Hefker, but I've never heard Hefkervelt.
Hefker means ownerless and
Right.
Welt means world. I got some Yiddishins in me. I'm definitely not fluent, but since I went to Lezhensk with 300 Hasidim on the plane.
Practically speaking Yiddish.
No, I'm very far from Yiddish, but I wish I now regret that I didn't ask my father to talk to me in Yiddish and my grandparents to talk to me in Yiddish. I would have loved it. So that another answer is okay, I'll give you this last answer. He says, since the main aspect of the Paschal Lamb is to the main aspect of Pesach is to show that we're canceling out idolatry. That's the main aspect of Pesach, that we're canceling out our idolatry. Because in Egypt, we worship the lamb. So therefore, in Pesach, we used to bring a Korban Pesach, a Paschal lamb. And so therefore, since it says that whoever does not give charity, it's as though he's worshiping idolatry. That's what it says in Ketuvos 68a. Therefore, we say, let everybody come and eat. Don't think that we're worshiping idolatry. We're giving charity on the first night. Okay. And in this context, the Birkas Ashir writes that on Pesach, there used to be a big practice to give a lot of charity. And by the way, you know that there's idea of Mos Chitim, that there's money for wheat. Everybody has to give. I could give Purim to poor people before you sit down on your Paschal Seder. Everybody, it's very expensive to do Pesach, but we have to make sure that we give money to poor people for Pesach. Yad Yehuda is a great local charity. There are a lot of beautiful charities in Israel, like in Israel. Everybody has to give money to poor people on Pesach for buying the Seder. Yes, Rabbi Yosef, and then we'll daven.
Before, like the answer before about Hefkervelt, does that mean that today we are allowed to invite non-Jewish people for the Pesach?
No, hold on.